Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you were willing to risk everything, even your family's approval? This is my story. The story of love, forgiveness, and the hardest choices I ever had to make. When Richard and I decided to get married, little did I know how much I would have to fight. Not just for us, but for acceptance, trust, and my own peace of mind. Stay with me as I share every raw, painful, and hopeful moment. My name is Sarah. I am 21 years old. And if someone had told me a few months ago that love could feel like a collision between destiny and disbelief, I would have laughed. I had always been a believer in logic, in reasoning, in control. Love, for me, was supposed to be something predictable, calm, and comprehensible. Yet, the moment I met Richard, everything I knew about love began to dissolve, like ink spreading across water, forming shapes I could not explain but could somehow understand. It happened on a quiet evening in early spring. The air had that kind of chill that makes you crave warmth, not just from a sweater but from someone's presence. I was at a cafe that I often visited after work, my favorite corner table near the window, a book open in front of me, though I was not reading. My mind was somewhere else, lost between thoughts and the hum of soft jazz playing in the background. That was when he walked in. Richard. He had that quiet confidence that did not demand attention, but somehow the room adjusted itself to his presence. He was not loud or flamboyant. He did not rush to speak or to be seen. He simply existed with a certain grace that drew the eyes without trying. His dark hair was slightly tousled, his eyes sharp yet distant, as though he was looking for something he could not name. I noticed him and then quickly looked away, pretending to focus on the words on my page. But something in me had already shifted. He ordered black coffee, no sugar, no cream. I remember because I found it unusual for someone to drink it that way so late in the evening. A few minutes later, he looked around, searching for a place to sit. The cafe was almost full except for the seat across from me. Our eyes met for the first time then. His were steady, calm, but there was curiosity behind them. He gestured politely, asking if he could sit. I nodded. That was how it began. We spoke very little that night. It was not one of those cinematic encounters where two strangers talk for hours. It was quieter than that, more real. He asked what I was reading. I told him it was a novel about finding purpose after heartbreak. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that looks almost reluctant, and said, "That sounds heavy." I replied that sometimes heavy stories feel more alive than light ones. He seemed to understand that in a way most people do not. For the next few weeks, he kept showing up at the same cafe. Sometimes he would arrive before me, sometimes after, but somehow we always ended up at the same table. It was as if the universe had quietly decided that our paths would cross again and again until we both stopped pretending it was a coincidence. He was different from anyone I had ever known. He spoke little, but every word he said carried meaning. He did not compliment for the sake of flattery. He noticed things. The way I held my cup, the way I tapped my pen when I was nervous, the way I always looked out the window before answering a question. He was observant in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen for the first time. Over time, those silent moments turned into longer conversations. We talked about dreams, about fears, about the kind of people we wanted to become. Richard had an intensity that fascinated me. He spoke about his ambitions like they were part of his DNA, something unchangeable, something he would chase no matter the cost. He told me he did not believe in luck, that success was the result of relentless discipline. There was a fire in his words, one that both inspired and intimidated me. I did not realize when friendship turned into something deeper. It was subtle, like sunlight creeping through curtains. One day I looked at him and felt my heart tighten in a way that was both painful and beautiful. I realized I wanted him in my life, not as a stranger at a cafe, not as a passing chapter, but as someone who stayed. When Richard confessed that he felt the same, it was not a grand moment filled with dramatic words. It was simple. We were sitting in his car after a long drive, the city lights flickering like distant stars. He turned to me and said, "Sarah, I do not know what this is supposed to be, but I know that when I am with you I feel right." That sentence stayed with me. I did not need anything else. The following weeks felt like a dream that had stepped into reality. Richard was not the kind of man who easily showed affection. He told me once that he had never been good at expressing emotions, that love always felt like something he could not fully translate into actions. But with me, he tried. He started doing little things, taking me out on drives, surprising me with flowers, driving 3 hours just to see me for a few minutes. Each gesture was quiet, thoughtful, and full of sincerity, and I loved him for that. There was something about his effort that touched me more than any grand romantic declaration could. I could see that he was learning, growing, adapting, just for me. He was becoming the version of himself that he never thought he could be. Sometimes I would look at him and wonder if I was dreaming, if someone so guarded could open up this much just for love. Yet even in the warmth of it all, there were moments of silence, moments when I felt the distance that still lingered in his eyes. Richard was a man built on self-control. He rarely let emotions take over. I could sense there were parts of him he kept hidden, places I had not yet been invited to see. But I did not push. I believed that time would unfold him slowly, piece by piece, until I would know him completely. Looking back now, those early days were filled with a delicate kind of magic, fragile, precious, and alive. I remember the way his laughter sounded when he finally allowed himself to relax, the way his hand felt steady around mine, the way he looked at me as if trying to memorize every detail of my face. At that time, I thought this was what forever felt like. I truly believed that love once found would always stay the same. But love, I would later learn, is not always gentle. It changes, it tests, it reveals. And sometimes it breaks you only to show you who you really are. But that part of the story comes later. For now, this was just the beginning. The moment I met Richard, the moment everything changed. I believed with a conviction that seemed unshakable that what Richard showed me was not love bombing. It was sincerity, the kind of effort that one puts into something precious, something worth preserving. Our relationship had a foundation built on trust and mutual support, especially during the most arduous moments. We had become each other's anchor in a world that often seemed to shift beneath our feet. When the storm clouds gathered, we held fast, promising to weather them together. Yet, as the days grew longer and the intimacy between us deepened, I found myself stepping closer into the labyrinth of Richard's personal life, a domain he guarded fiercely, with walls that seemed impermeable to intrusion. It was there that the shadows began to emerge, shadows that whispered secrets I was not prepared to hear. Richard had demons. I came to learn this not through whispered confessions or tearful admissions, but through the subtle changes that crept into his behavior like an unrelenting tide. The man who once showed me tenderness and quiet determination was sometimes replaced by someone distant, fragmented, and almost unrecognizable. One evening, a phone call shattered the fragile peace I had clung to. The voice on the other end was Richard's, unsteady, tinged with something I could only describe as panic wrapped in regret. He told me he had gone out with friends to drink, that the night had blurred into a haze. They had taken shrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms, something I never thought he would touch. He recounted fragments, scattered memories like shards of glass cutting through his mind. He remembered kissing someone whose face he could not place. And then, the disconcerting realization dawned that when consciousness returned, He was lying there without his clothes, an island of confusion amidst a sea of uncertainty. He confessed that, to the best of his recollection, they had tried to have sex but had not succeeded. The memory was fragmented, a puzzle with missing pieces that left him feeling exposed and vulnerable. I felt a tempest swell inside me. My heart pounded with a cacophony of emotions, fear, betrayal, sorrow, and a desperate need to understand what had truly transpired. How could the man who had so carefully built a sanctuary for us both in his heart allow such chaos to invade? In the days that followed, I found myself oscillating between compassion and doubt. I wanted to believe in the sincerity of his efforts, to hold on to the idea that beneath the fractured exterior, the man I loved still existed. Yet the truth was becoming increasingly elusive. Richard's struggles with drugs and alcohol were not mere mistakes or one-time lapses. They were battles raging beneath the surface, battles that threatened to consume him entirely. I saw glimpses of the man he could be, the man who drove hours just to see me, the man who attempted to rewrite his story with kindness. But those moments were often eclipsed by the turmoil that followed. One night, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the conversation in my mind. I tried to piece together the puzzle of his confession. Was this an isolated event, or a symptom of a deeper fracture? Was he being honest with me, or was there more he could not bear to reveal? The vulnerability in his voice haunted me. I realized that love was not always a tale of perfect harmony. Sometimes, love meant facing the darkest parts of a person, even when it threatened to break your own spirit. I wanted to support him, to be the steadfast light in his shadowed world, but I also had to protect my own heart. The line between empathy and self-preservation blurred, leaving me adrift in a sea of uncertainty. As Richard wrestled with his demons, I found myself questioning the very foundation of our relationship. Was our love strong enough to survive the storm? Or was I merely holding on to an illusion, a desperate hope that would one day shatter? That night marked a turning point, a moment when innocence collided with reality, and the path forward became obscured by doubt. Yet amid the turmoil, I held on to one truth. Love is never simple. It is a complex dance of light and darkness, hope and despair, strength and fragility. And in this dance, I was determined to find my way, even if it meant walking through fire. Despite everything, I loved him. This simple truth stood firm amidst the chaos that threatened to engulf us. My heart, battered and bruised by uncertainty and pain, still beat for Richard. It wanted to believe in him, to hold on to the hope that the man I had come to know was not lost, merely momentarily veiled by darkness. The weight of the past weeks hung heavily between us. His confession, the nights of silence, the moments when doubt clouded my mind, yet beneath it all, a quiet yearning for forgiveness blossomed within me. I wanted to forgive Richard, not merely for his mistakes, but for the human frailty that those mistakes revealed. Love, I realized, was not about perfection. It was about accepting the imperfect, the flawed, and choosing to stand beside them regardless. Richard spoke to me one evening with a vulnerability that was raw and unfiltered. He told me this chapter in his life was a turning point, a moment that had forced him to confront his demons with unflinching honesty. He admitted that he had long chosen the easier path, the one paved with avoidance and denial, rather than facing his struggles head-on. That night, as he spoke, I saw a man transformed, not because he had suddenly become flawless, but because he had decided to fight. To fight for himself, for us, and for the future he now dared to envision. "I am tired of running, Sarah," he said, his voice steady but imbued with emotion. "For too long I have taken the path of least resistance. I have let fear and weakness dictate my choices. But this ends now. I want to make things right. Not just for you, but for me." Hearing those words stirred something deep within me. It was not an easy journey, and I knew it would not be immediate or without setbacks. But the sincerity in his eyes, the determination in his tone was undeniable. I chose to believe in that. Forgiveness, I realized, was a process, a deliberate act of the heart that required strength, patience, and hope. I was willing to embark on that journey with Richard, even if the road ahead was uncertain. Together, we began to talk, not just superficially, but with the kind of depth and honesty that had previously eluded us. He shared the fears that had haunted him for years, the battles with addiction that he had hidden behind a mask of stoicism. He spoke of his family, his upbringing, and the moments that had shaped the man he had become. I listened not with judgment but with empathy. I wanted to understand him fully, to embrace both the light and the shadows that coexisted within him. In turn, I shared my own vulnerabilities, the doubts that sometimes gnawed at my confidence, the fears of losing him, and the hope that we could build something lasting despite the odds. Our conversations became the foundation of a new chapter, one grounded in transparency and mutual commitment. Richard sought help, reaching out to professionals who could guide him through recovery. It was a difficult path, fraught with challenges, but each step forward was a victory. I stood by him through late-night phone calls, moments of weakness, and the slow rebuilding of trust. There were times when the weight of the past threatened to pull us apart, but we held fast, reminding each other why we chose this journey together. Through it all, I came to understand that love is not a static feeling, but a living, evolving force. It requires courage, not only to give but also to receive forgiveness. It demands resilience to face hardship and grace to embrace change. Richard's transformation was not instantaneous, nor was it perfect. There were days when the shadows returned, moments when doubts resurfaced. But the difference now was that he faced those moments with accountability and a willingness to grow. I admired his strength and was humbled by his honesty. It made me reflect on my own capacity for compassion and the depths of my commitment. Our relationship, once fragile and tentative, began to solidify into something profound. It was no longer just about the exhilaration of new love, but about enduring through trials, choosing each other repeatedly, even when it was hard. As I watched Richard reclaim his life, I felt a renewed sense of hope. The man who once hid behind walls was now opening doors to healing, to connection, and to a future where love was not just an ideal, but a lived reality. In loving him, I found strength within myself, a strength I had not known existed. I learned that forgiveness is not a weakness, but a courageous act of liberation. This was our turning point, a moment not defined by past mistakes, but by the choice to rise above them. And in this choice, we discovered the true meaning of love, not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth every struggle. After months of rebuilding and rediscovering each other, Richard and I made a decision that felt like the natural culmination of our journey. We would get married. The idea of committing ourselves fully to one another, of promising to face whatever life threw at us together, filled me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. I believed that love, tempered by struggle and forgiveness, had prepared us for this next step. Richard was quietly determined. He spoke of marriage not as an end, but as a new beginning, a chance to create a shared future grounded in honesty and unwavering support. I felt proud to stand beside him, ready to embrace this new chapter. However, the excitement of our decision was soon met with resistance. Resistance that I had anticipated but hoped would dissolve with time. My father, a man of stern principles and protective instincts, was not ready to accept Richard as his future son-in-law. His disapproval was not rooted in Richard's character alone, but in what he had witnessed. Moments when Richard's struggles with alcohol cast a shadow over his otherwise sincere efforts. My father had seen Richard drink excessively at gatherings, sometimes losing control, and it filled him with concern and doubt. To him, those incidents were not isolated mistakes, but signs of a deeper problem that threatened my happiness and well-being. I tried to explain, to reassure my father that Richard was on a path of change, that he was fighting to overcome his demons. I told him about the steps Richard was taking, the counseling, the support groups, the late-night conversations where Richard confronted his past with honesty. But my father's skepticism was unyielding. "You do not understand, Sarah," he said one evening, his voice heavy with worry. "I have watched Richard closely. Drinking is not just a habit for him. It is a weakness that could destroy you both. I cannot give my blessing when I see him lose himself at parties, surrounded by people who encourage his worst tendencies." His words cut deep. I knew he spoke out of love, but the fear in his eyes made me question whether Richard's efforts were enough to change my father's mind. Despite my best attempts to bridge the gap, my father stood firm. He refused to attend our wedding if Richard remained the man he had seen at those gatherings. The tension in our family grew, the divide between my loyalty to Richard and my respect for my father stretching wider with each passing day. Richard, too, felt the weight of this disapproval. He never asked for leniency, never demanded acceptance. Instead, he took my father's doubts as a challenge to prove himself worthy, not only to me but to the man who had raised me. We tried to create opportunities for them to spend time together, hoping that familiarity would soften the rigid boundaries. Richard approached my father with humility, acknowledging his past mistakes and expressing his commitment to change. But my father's guarded demeanor remained, a silent barrier that neither words nor gestures could fully penetrate. I found myself caught between two worlds, my heart urging me to stand by Richard, my family urging caution and protection. I struggled to reconcile these conflicting loyalties, feeling the strain of love tested by circumstance. There were moments when I questioned whether our love was strong enough to withstand this opposition. Could we truly build a future together if the foundation was shaken by distrust? Yet Richard's perseverance inspired me. He did not falter in his resolve to change, nor did he waver in his love for me. His determination to prove himself worthy of my family's acceptance became a testament to his growth. In quiet moments, he confessed his fears to me, the fear that he might lose me, the fear that his past would always define him. I reassured him that love was not about perfection, but about the willingness to fight for each other. Together, we resolved to face this challenge head-on. Our wedding would not just be a celebration of our love, but a declaration of our commitment to overcome obstacles, to forge a path where doubt gave way to understanding. I hoped that in time, my father's heart would soften, that he would see beyond the shadows of Richard's past to the man who was striving to become better. For now, the road ahead was uncertain, marked by tension and unresolved conflict, but I believed in the power of love to heal wounds, to bridge divides, and to create family in the truest sense. Our story was far from over. The decision to marry was just the beginning of a new battle, a battle for acceptance, trust, and the promise of a shared future. After much contemplation and countless sleepless nights, I made a decision that altered the course of my life. Richard and I chose to marry quietly, away from the scrutinizing eyes and judgments of family and society. We proceeded with a court marriage, a union solemnized by law, but devoid of the traditional fanfare that often accompanies such commitments. It was not a decision made lightly. The rift between Richard and my father had grown too wide, the chasm filled with mistrust and apprehension. My father's refusal to accept Richard as his son-in-law was unwavering. Despite my pleas, his disapproval lingered like a shadow over our relationship, casting doubt and pain where there should have been joy. On the day of our court marriage, I felt a mixture of liberation and melancholy. There was freedom in taking control of my own destiny, in affirming my love for Richard without waiting for permission or approval. Yet there was also a deep ache for the family ties that had been strained, for the acceptance I longed to reconcile. The ceremony was brief but profound. Standing beside Richard, I felt the weight of our shared past, the battles we had fought, and the hope we nurtured for a future built on trust and resilience. Our vows were whispered promises, not just to each other but to ourselves, that we would persevere, grow, and face whatever challenges came our way as partners. Shortly after our marriage, my father reached out. It was a call I had both dreaded and anticipated. When I answered, his voice was firm, yet tinged with a reluctance that mirrored my own conflicted feelings. "Sarah," he began, "I want you to know that I have accepted your decision. I will not come to meet you or Richard. I ask that you do not expect me to be a part of your married life. This is the path you have chosen, and I will respect it by keeping my distance." His words were a mixture of acceptance and reproach. He was setting boundaries, making it clear that while he would not sever our relationship completely, he could not embrace Richard as a member of our family. I was left speechless. The pain of his words was palpable, yet I understood the caution behind them. My father's love was complicated, a blend of protectiveness, disappointment, and hope that perhaps time would bring healing. In that moment, I made a solemn promise to myself. I would honor my father's wishes, but I would also stand firm in my commitment to Richard. This was my life, my love, and my choice. I was prepared to bear the consequences, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. As days turned into weeks, I found myself reflecting on the fragile balance I was trying to maintain. I loved Richard deeply, but I also loved my father. I knew that by choosing Richard, I had wounded my father's heart, and that reality weighed heavily on me. One evening, in a moment of quiet reflection, I spoke to my father honestly and openly. "Father," I said, "I understand your concerns, and I have tried to make you see Richard as I do. I have forgiven him for his past because I believe in the man he is becoming. I asked you to accept him, but you chose not to. I do not blame you, but I need you to know something." I paused, gathering the courage to voice what had been in my heart. If Richard were to falter again, if he were to lose his way and bring shame upon our family, I would be the one to bear the burden, not you. I would be the one who faces the judgment of society and the disappointment in your eyes. I chose him, and I am willing to accept whatever consequences come from that choice. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could imagine my father absorbing my words, feeling the gravity of my resolve. "I will not let you down, Father," I continued. "But I needed you to understand that I am not a child anymore. I have made my decision, and I stand by it." That conversation marked a turning point. It was an acknowledgement of the distance between us, but also a testament to my independence and determination. I shared my story with friends and confidants, those who knew the complexity of my situation. Their responses varied. Some expressed admiration for my courage. Others warned me of the potential heartache ahead. I invite you, my readers, to share your thoughts in the comments. Was my decision right? Could I have handled it differently? Your perspectives matter, and I welcome the dialogue as I continue to navigate this journey. Through it all, I have come to understand that love is not a fairy tale. It is messy, complicated, and often fraught with pain. It requires sacrifice and the strength to face harsh realities, yet it also brings growth, hope, and the possibility of redemption. Richard and I are walking this path together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever storms may come. My father's distance is a wound that will take time to heal, but I hold on to the hope that one day, understanding and acceptance will prevail. Until then, I carry both love and loss within me, a testament to the resilience of the human heart.